Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
On being you, we're going to address the fifth principle today. In our religious lives, the democratic process requires trust in the development of each individual conscience. a belief that such development is possible for each of us, as well as a commitment to cultivate our own conscience. We could call it a commitment to the value of each person. In the words of Theodore Parker, democracy means not, I am as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is only as precious as my willingness to acknowledge the same connection in others. The words of Reverend Parissa Parsa, Executive Director of the Public Conversations Project. Today's opening words are number 420. We are here to abet creation and to witness it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. Annie Dillard. And our opening hymn, number 346. Come sing a song with me.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Today's transitional words are number 440, and they are responsorial. From the fragmented world. From the fragmented world of our everyday lives, we gather together in search of wholeness.
By many cares and preoccupations, by diverse and selfish aims, are we separated from one another and divided within ourselves.
Yet we know that no branch is utterly severed from the tree of life that sustains us all.
We cherish our oneness with those around us and the countless generations that have gone before us.
We would hold fast to all of good we inherit, even as we would leave behind us the outworn and the false.
We would escape from bondage to the ideas of our own day and from the delusions of our own fancy.
Let us labor in hope for the dawning of a new day without hatred, violence, and injustice.
Let us nurture the growth in our own lives of the love that has shone in the lives of the greatest of men and women, the rays of whose lamps still illumine our way.
In this spirit we gather, In this spirit, we pray. Philip Hewitt. Today, Dr. Frank Young will ask us, why are we here? And try to answer the following questions. Why do we gather together? What is it that we are doing? What do we hope to accomplish? What makes this gathering important? Frank's a retired computer science faculty member from Rose-Hulman. He is a thoughtful and peaceful Quaker.
It's nice to be back here again after such a long absence. The other day, Julie looked at her diary and discovered that it had been almost a full year since we were last here. Zoom meetings and videotaped services on YouTube are just not the same as being here in person. Obviously, we have not returned to normality, and it may be some time before this will happen. We are still under rather severe restrictions at Westminster Village. But change is slowly happening. We do have our vaccinations, and safety restrictions are slowly being relaxed. We can now see the end of the long COVID-induced tunnel, but we must continue to take actions necessary to preserve our own health and the health of those that we come in contact with. My task today is to attempt to answer an important question. Why are we here? It is a very appropriate question after this long year of limited personal interactions and constant concern with virus spread. This question, like most of the questions discussed here, does not have a simple answer. It is a question that we must often reconsider as things change and as we grow and learn. It has been many years since I was in elementary school, but I can still remember some of the erroneous ideas of my youth. I thought Sunday was a day when everyone should go to church. Our church was the Methodist Church, and it should not surprise you that I thought then that all religious services were substantially identical and Protestant. I was unaware of the religious diversity in the community. I had some vague and not totally correct knowledge of the traditions of the Roman Catholic community, but the Archbishop prohibited members of that community from worshiping with non-Roman Catholic congregations, and their catechism made it clear that they were in possession of the only truth. This made discussions with my Catholic fellow students about their beliefs and practices difficult and quite limited. My knowledge of Jewish beliefs and practices was virtually non-existent. I was also unaware of those in the community whose religious beliefs were not in the Judeo-Christian tradition. As I got older, I learned more about the diversity of my community and about the diversity of religions found in the world. My family and I joined the local Quaker meeting when I was a teenager. I discovered that most of my classmates and many adults knew little about Quaker beliefs and practices. Our community was mostly Protestant, and many assumed that everyone's beliefs were Protestant. There were also some who were very uncomfortable with anyone who had a different religious tradition. At this time, I also discovered that membership in a small religious community, especially one that was not a regular Protestant group, made one identifiable as different and unusual. These labels are never helpful to teenagers. I was fortunate to have 1 year of excellent Sunday school classes, we called them First Day School, at the local Quaker meeting. We studied the Hebrew Bible, which we called the Old Testament. Our teacher had been raised as a Jew, and her knowledge of the Bible was extensive. We were taught about the ways that the text had been altered and modified over generations. We were taught about the ways that different groups had made differing determinations about what the religious laws were and how they should be observed. We learned the history of the people who had inspired, preserved, and used the Hebrew Bible. This increased my understanding of the way that our society made some of my friends feel different and somewhat unwelcome. Religious beliefs and practices are quite diverse. It was easy for me to grow up 70 years ago thinking that Sunday was the only day for worship. It was easy to grow up thinking that congregational worship is the most important or even the only kind of worship. Even today, it is all too easy to erroneously assume that certain practices are universal. Religious buildings set aside for worship services are not always considered necessary by religious groups. Temples for veneration are often erected, but they are not necessarily nearby. For example, the Baha'is have only one temple in the entire United States. The 7-day week is also not a universal rule. Even those religions that observe a 7-day week have serious differences as to which day of the week is reserved for religious services. Seventh-day Adventists have group worship on Saturdays. Jews have group worship on the Sabbath, which extends from nightfall on Friday to nightfall on Saturday. Many Muslims have their group prayers at the mosque every Friday afternoon. If you have ever been to a country which has a large Christian population, a large Seventh-day Adventist population, and a large Muslim population, you understand what it means to have 3-day weekends. Weekly or periodical congregational gatherings are not even considered necessary by every religious group. There are groups where most worship is done in private or in the family. Regular synagogue services are a recent aspect of Jewish religious practice, only about 2,000 years old. During the times recorded in the Hebrew Bible, there was a temple in Jerusalem, but worship was primarily a family activity. Even among the religions that have weekly congregational meetings, there are some significant differences. The Muslim Hajj needs to be done only once in a lifetime. Baha'is have a 19-day religious calendar. Buddhists don't have any religious calendar. Hindus have multiple yearly calendars, depending on the region and the particular god being celebrated. Then there is the issue of worship itself. Is worship the veneration of a god? Is it prayers to a god? Is it praise of a god? Is it vows of obedience to a god? Is it promises of loyalty to the laws of a god? Does worship even require the existence of a god? These days, there are evangelical Protestant praise services that celebrate the relationship the members have with God, with song and personal testimonies, raising a joyful and usually very loud noise unto the Lord. The Protestant services that I attended as a youth did not include trumpets or drums, but did include an impressive organ and some rather good choral singing. There was also a weekly recitation of the Apostles' Creed to remind congregants of the basic tenets of the denomination. There was also a monthly communion service where Jesus' Last Supper was celebrated. Other Christian denominations, for example, Lutheran, Episcopal, and Roman Catholic, have more ritual with less variation from week to week. The Roman Catholic Mass includes recitation of the Credo, in Latin at that time, scheduled readings from a prescribed yearly liturgical schedule, and always includes a ritual recreation of Jesus' Last Supper. Jewish services always include readings from the Torah and ritual prayers that vary by season. The prayers in Muslim services at the mosque are substantially identical to the daily prayers that are expected of all Muslims, but there will also be readings from the Quran and teachings by the Imam. Most religious services are called worship services, but the meaning of worship must not be restricted to the adoration of, praise of, gratitude for, and obedience to one or several gods. There are religions that have many gods, one God, or no God. A broad definition of worship is required, given the variety of religious beliefs found in the world. What are Unitarian Universalist practices regarding worship? The impertinent answer is that they are all over the place. There are Unitarian churches with substantially Protestant forms of worship. Others have services like those of the Ethical Culture Society, intellectual talks about moral, ethical, and societal issues. There are other possible choices. Some UUs call weekly services religious, others merely call them services. Quakers have as much diversity of worship as the Unitarian Universalists. There are Quaker churches that have praise worship and other Quaker services with substantially Protestant worship. Traditional Quaker meetings have expectant waiting for divine inspiration, usually called silent worship. I expect that you're now thoroughly confused, unable to identify what is and what is not worship. It is time to pause for a joke. Every talk needs a joke that can at least be remembered for a short time. This is exactly the right place for this joke. I encourage you to remember it at least until the end when I come to my conclusion. Once upon a time, a person came to visit a Quaker meeting for worship, the silent kind, for the first time. The visitor came in a bit early and sat alone on a bench. Others arrived, but nothing seemed to happen. A Quaker came in and sat on the same bench. Still, nothing seemed to happen. After some more waiting, the visitor, in exasperation, turned to the Quaker and asked, "When does the service begin?" The Quaker quietly answered, "When the meeting for worship has ended." Differences in the form of worship are quite likely in denominations that do not have a required set of beliefs for members. Differences also arise in those religious groups that do not have any controlling hierarchy, setting required standards for church practice. Both the Quakers and the Unitarian Universalists are non-creedal and non-hierarchical, and their religious practices will often vary from congregation to congregation. The freedom found in Quakerism and Unitarian Universalism comes at a price. One may not feel comfortable with certain aspects of certain types of church practices. One may go to a religious service expecting one type of congregational gathering and get something completely different, completely unexpected. The diversity of practices may cause too many surprises. So, why are we here? Why are we joining together as a congregation in this religious activity? What are we trying to accomplish here? What makes this gathering important? UUs do not have codified rituals for communion or baptism. Potluck meals or welcoming a new child into the UU community do not have the religious meanings that the Christian rituals do. Unitarian Universalists do not have a collection of formal prayers, often memorized, for different times, events, and days. UUs do not have special laws to regulate the behavior and lives of all members. So, the question that we started with is really, what is our Unitarian Universalist worship? Why do we come together on Sunday mornings? What are we doing here? What are our goals? What are these gatherings? Why are these gatherings important to us? What makes our UU congregational gatherings significant for us? Let me propose a short list of things that make our UU Sunday morning religious gatherings important to us. Respect for the teachings of the past. Freedom from being limited to past teachings. Recognition of present and past problems and errors. Active search for truth and meaning. Desire to improve the future for all. Willingness to accept new ideas, new goals, new truths. Willingness to accept diversity in both belief and action. Willingness to learn, discuss, and change. Our UU worship does not require beseeching, praising, acknowledging, or even thinking about the divine, although that could be done. Our UU worship does not require obedience to rigid rules, although that also could be done. Our UU worship does not require the use of formal rituals, although some could be established by the congregation. What our UU worship does is require a deep concern for the future. Our reason for coming together, the meaning we give to our congregational gatherings, is to have a positive effect on the future. We are here because we want tomorrow to be better than today. We are here to learn and be inspired to make the world better for everyone. Our worship is the beginning of the creation of heaven here on earth. That is our purpose. That is why we come here. That is what we hope to accomplish. That is what makes this gathering important, and that is our worship. The difficult work, the service that is inspired by our worship, begins immediately after this gathering. Thank you.
Today's closing hymn is number 326, Let the Beauty We Have Known.
Let all the beauty we have known illuminate our hearts and minds, rejoice in wonders daily shown, in faith and joy and love that binds. We celebrate with singing hearts the loveliness of sky and earth, the inspiration of the arts, the miracle of every birth. Life's music and its poetry surround and bless us through our days. For these we sing in harmony, together giving thanks and praise.
Today's closing words are 499. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns and the round ocean and the living air, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. William Wordsworth.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore.
Go in peace, know that you are loved, and that your life is sacred.